hope you can hear me in Florida, in Tampa Bay, in Sarasota, in Orlando. We are thinking about you. We have got the report from the Orlando Sentinel about the damage done all the way across the state. The good news, it could have been worse if it had been even a little bit further north. Bad news, it's pretty bad. And so Food for the Poor is working with us, sponsoring a campaign to bring disaster relief to the people of Florida and a few shipments up to North Carolina now that the roads are back open. Hurricane relief, the banner is over at hughhewitt.com. Please be as generous as you can. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I dug deep yesterday because it's a lot of people need a lot of help. They're doing a great job in Florida, and eventually they will catch up in the mountains of Tennessee and the mountains of North Carolina. We appreciate your helping us. The Give Relief banner is at hughhewitt.com. You cannot miss it. So yesterday, America, I was bothered by Kamala Harris, not by her policies, which are hard left and would be ruinous, not by her person. She seems perfectly pleasant. What bothers me is her grammar. And I began to recall high school teachers. Now, maybe you driving to work this morning or listening right now or watching on YouTube, maybe you don't remember high school. Maybe you don't remember K through 8. I actually can remember everybody except who my 6th grade teacher was. It's like a blank. Sister Mary Neal in 5th grade and Mr. Santor in 7th grade, but I have no idea who was there in 6th grade, so I'll ask somebody. But I know everybody in high school. And you've heard me mention Ron Karenbauer before, the superb Latin and ancient Greek teacher. Fred Hoover taught American literature and English literature. Kathy Santucci, who said, there are schools other than Notre Dame, you know, and there are a lot of people. I don't think I've ever mentioned Mrs. Dennison. Mrs. Dennison was my 9th grade English teacher. She was my brother's 9th grade English teacher. Both of my brothers, Mycroft and Sherlock, 9th grade English teacher. She was the 9th grade English teacher at Warren John F. Kennedy High School forever. And her 9th grade English class was never different, no matter what year you took it. You diagrammed sentences all year long. The idea being that if we can put into your head how to diagram a sentence, you will be able to communicate, and you must not use run-on sentences. Run-on sentences are those where the conjunction and or but continues the sentence, and you're aware of it when you are a veteran of Mrs. Dennison's class. Can we put up the picture of a diagram sentence, Harley, for those who are watching on the Salem News Channel? This is a classic diagram sentence. Francis Petrarch lives, and it goes on. You can see it. It goes. You diagram down, 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 dependent clause, dependent clause, dependent clause. They're not good. I teach people in my law school classes to speak in short, direct sentences. Make sure you have a beginning and an end. Don't do run-on sentences. Most people don't communicate in run-on sentences. Most people don't use conjunctions. Serious people who want to communicate spend their time crafting a message that can be digested. And I'm here to illustrate for you that is not Kamala Harris. She cannot communicate. The vice president may have skipped 9th grade. Maybe, because Dwayne diagrammed sentences in 9th grade. Harley did not. So Kamala Harris is a little bit older than Dwayne. So maybe they didn't diagram sentences in Montreal. I'd have to ask my friend Russ if he's listening. Was that part of the mandatory curriculum? Did you have to diagram sentences? Let me give you some examples. Let's go back to July of 2023 at the Essence Festival. The Vice President on Culture, cut number 1.
Well, I think culture is a reflection of our moment and our time, right? And present culture is the way we express how we're feeling about the moment. And we should always find times to express how we feel about the moment that is a reflection of joy, because it comes in the morning. we have to find ways to also express the way we feel about the moment in terms of just having language and a connection to how people are experiencing life. And I think about it in that way too.
That might be two run-on sentences. It is certainly possible that it is one. Even if it is two, they are very difficult to diagram. Conjunctions are the bane. Dependent clauses are the bane. Let's then go to Louisiana, March 21, 2022, the Internet Accessibility Event, cut number 3.
And talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
All right, that is impossible to diagram. Let's go back an earlier year to 2022. This is Kamala talking to the U.S.-ASEAN Conference on Working Together, cut number 4.
Especially true when it comes to the climate crisis, which is why we will work together and continue to work together to address these issues, to tackle these challenges, and to work together as we continue to work operating from the new norms, rules, and agreements that we will convene to work together on to galvanize global action.
I don't know how to do that one. I tried. Can't do it. Let's come up to the Today Show, January 13th, 2022, cut number 5.
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree that there are things and tools that are available to us to slow this thing down.
Now, that might be two sentences. It might be neither of them particularly good, but it might be two, but I think it's one. Cut number 6, Kamala Harris, this year in New Hampshire. Cut number, it's very short, but it's complex. Cut number 6.
Let us understand, which we do, our purpose at this very moment. Let us remember the broad shoulders upon which we stand and the traditions of this very fight that have led to what we have been able to accomplish.
That can't be diagrammed. My ears are bleeding. Mrs. Dennison is rolling over in her grave, and she's a good woman, and I know she is with the angels, but she is saying, who is her 9th grade teacher? Let me speak to her. Cut number 7.
But let's take this one step at a time, understanding that right now, on the issue of energy, our allies have stood firm and unified in a way that many of the pundits didn't predict would happen, to ensure that we are unified in our approach to this issue.
Let's talk.
I don't know how to do that one. One more before the break. Cut number 8.
The work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
That cannot be made sense of. That's not an edited cut. They did edit. The CBS people laid down, Dwayne explained it on the air check yesterday. The air check is only available if you belong to the universe. He explained what they did on the editing side, and I would recommend it to you. It's worth joining the universe just to hear Dwayne explain to me how that 60 Minutes did this number. I do want to put on the record, I'm going to come back to more Kamala clips, because Kamala clips is a category unto itself. I'm overwhelmed with the bad grammar, and I am convinced she could not have gone to a 9th grade where they diagram sentences. Now, if you take Latin and ancient Greek, I had 5 years of that, and then another year of Latin as an undergrad. You also learn nouns and declensions and diagrams. You know Latin is a structured language. But it has beginnings. It has ends. I teach my law students. I stop them when they say the word like, and, but. When they extend a sentence. When they are stalling. when they are word salading. I stop them. I tell them they will never persuade a jury or a judge if they cannot speak in direct, coherent sentences. You pause between sentences. You direct your talk at individuals. You have confidence and command of the language. That's not Kamala. Let me continue where I began. The death of the diagram sentence. I have a hypothesis. I do not know if it's true. I think Kamala Harris may have skipped ninth grade, or high school in Montreal did not involve diagramming sentences. Because we're doing Kamala clips this morning on this Friday as we end Kamala Harris' no good, terrible, horrible week. And I'll talk about that with Ben Domenech in the next hour when we do our week in review segment. But it occurred to me after her Univision town hall last night, where she did a sentence that I will end with, I can crescendo to it, that she actually never took a English class where she was obliged to diagram. Maybe it was in French. I don't know how French works. I know how Latin works. I know how English works. Let me bring you clip number 10 in the Kamala Harris clip file that I have on hand to demonstrate she does not know how to communicate. Cut number 10.
We must together work together to see where we are headed, where we are going, and our vision for where we should be, but also see it as a moment, yes, to together address the challenges.
That is one sentence, and it cannot be diagrammed. Let's go to cut number 11. This is the somewhat infamous Stephanie Ruhle interview from earlier this summer. The previous clip was in Paris, so the Parisian translator was truly at a loss. But this one, this is MSNBC and Stephanie Ruhle, cut number 11.
Some of the work is going to be through what we do in terms of giving benefits and assistance to state and local governments around transit dollars, and looking holistically at the connection between that and housing, and looking holistically at the incentives we in the federal government can create for local and state governments to actually engage in planning in a holistic manner that includes prioritizing affordable housing for working people.
I don't know where holistically shows up. Would you put up the diagram picture again, Harley? If we were to diagram that sentence, that's the most difficult one except for last night's. That one, I just would not know where to begin. Let's go to cut number 12, which has got non sequiturs and run-on sentences and an undiagrammable failure to communicate. Cut number 12.
We are an optimistic people. We are an optimistic people. Americans, by character, are people who have dreams and ambitions and aspirations. We believe in what is possible. We believe in what can be. And we believe in fighting for that. That's how we came into being. Because the people before us understood that one of the greatest expressions for the love of our country, one of the greatest expressions of patriotism, is to fight for the ideals of who we are.
One of the greatest expressions used twice complicates the diet. Now, some people in Kamala's camp will say that was 4-sentence Hugh, not one. Possible, the articulation of the 4 sentences is not easily discoverable, given that the vice president speaks like this, which never ends and always pauses. But when she keeps ending in, and when I add in, and when she adds in, or both of us add in, the complexity of the sentence, the one about which we are referring, gets more difficult by the minute that we talk and don't stop and clearly communicate an end, if there is to be an end of that which we are about to end, which is a sentence that can be diagrammed. Let's go to cut number 12. This is Kamala Harris with Oprah again. Maybe I played this. Did I just play this one? I just played that. Let's go to cut number 13. Sentence, side of the road. There's no guardrail because she completely switches without ending a sentence. So she doesn't stick the point her reliance on dependent clauses and on conjunctions is terrifying for ninth grade English teachers everywhere. Mrs. Dennison, God rest your soul, you would never have allowed me to do this. And Ron Karrenbauer, I know you would never have allowed us to do this. But I don't know about Montreal. I just don't know. Let's do two more for you, maybe three more. Let's do two more. Cut number 14. This is only in August in Pennsylvania. Cut number 14.
Our election is about understanding the importance of this beautiful country of ours in terms of what we stand for around the globe as a democracy. As a democracy, we know there's a duality to the nature of democracy. On the one hand, incredible strength when it is intact. What it does for its people to protect and defend their rights, their liberty, and their freedom. Incredibly strong and incredibly fragile.
All right. Because she ends with "and incredibly fragile," it complicates the entire process. There might have been two sentences there. It's very hard not to hear it as one, and it's impossible to diagram as one. Which brings me to what got me going on this. Well, yesterday, the vice president did a Univision town hall, and she delivered of herself a 58-second. It's a piece of work. It's an art. It's abstract. It's theater performance. It's amazing. Kamala Harris Unbound, Kamala Harris Unplugged, cut number 16.
So my pledge to you is that by the grace of God, and hopefully with your support as well, when I am elected president, I will bring back that border security bill, and I will sign it into law, and do the work of focusing on what we must do to have an orderly and humane pathway to earn citizenship. And one of the biggest problems with failure to have a comprehensive plan for immigration is that we have not given them the pathway to earn their right to citizenship. And that is, again, that is one of the priorities for me, frankly, in terms of my motivation for what I know we must do. And I think it's...
I don't know if that is one sentence or two. She used "and" twice. Some people can write, and if they have an editor, as I have been blessed with editors at the Washington Post and Fox News and at every other prior place I've written, the old Weekly Standard. Mike Duffy is one of my favorite editors at the Post. He said, "Hugh, you're a great writer. You always say everything twice." And so I have to go through your column and cut through. And I am. I am redundant. I am a redundant writer. But I'm a terrific speaker. Because if I want to close a sentence down, you know it, because I put the emphasis on the end. That was one sentence. This is another sentence. If you have a student who is applying for college, you will encounter the dreaded college essay. The good news for the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I is that we no longer have to do those. And if you have two boys, and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I had two boys and one girl. The one girl did her own essays on her own by herself. We never saw them. The two boys had to be sat down in front of a computer and given prompts because they were boys. They're both superb communicators now, by the way. So it's not a lifelong disability if you can't speak in complete sentences. But it is a disability for the vice president, because I can't listen to this for 4 years. Can you? I ask you, can you listen to this for 4 years? Because it's incoherence on stilts. It is the Hindenburg of rhetoric. It is an absolute train wreck. And those were 4 sentences. Mrs. Dennison, God bless you. You taught me well. Ron Karrenbauer, God bless you. Eternal rest granted to them, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. Amen. It is so easy to learn how to communicate effectively. It takes some practice. She's almost 60 years old. She's been in public office for 16 years. She is allegedly a prosecutor. She worked at McDonald's. You don't use a lot of complex sentences at McDonald's. To my knowledge, I never worked at a McDonald's. I worked at, and by the way, this would have been, I'm using a complex sentence right now, a fine question. Madam Vice President, which McDonald's did you work at and when? Because I can tell you in brief every summer job I ever held, but it would also be an opportunity for her not to do a run-on sentence. I worked at McDonald's at 6th and Elbow Street in San Francisco. I worked at the McDonald's at Larder and Main in Oakland. She could answer that with one sentence and be complete and direct. Kamala Eclipse is a horror show and an obstacle course. It is a horror show for ninth grade English teachers everywhere. It is an obstacle course for whomever her audience is. Many of you will say, Hugh, you're missing the main point. She wants amnesty. I'm not missing that point. We know she wants amnesty. We know she's a failure at the border. I'm making a point that even if you are a left-winger, you can't listen to that for 4 years. You can't. You will be deranged. You will be in agony. Take the win. Get the Senate back in 2026, because if Donald Trump is president, you will run the map. Don't do this to us, please. I can't play Kamala Eclipse for the next 4 years, because I am bound by my contract to do.
The 2-2 delivery. Swung on, hit a ton, deep left, Green, back, track, wall, gone! David Fry! Off the bench, a 2-strike, 2-out, 2-run home run. And Cleveland's back on top for the third time tonight. 4-3.
I just wanted to begin my talk with Mike Gallagher,
And
Congressman extraordinaire in the
crew.
old days. Now he is with the Hudson Institute, a Wall Street Journal reporter and writer, and a baseball man. So I just want you to know what it's like to have a pinch hit home run in postseason, Mike Gallagher.
The Cleveland Browns won at present, Hugh. How am I?
I'm glad you were muted for the beginning of that slanderous attack on Cleveland, because then we didn't hear what you were going to say about that. I just want you to know, the Brewers, I guess they've lost their series. Is that correct?
Listen, Hugh, let's not quibble about who's won and who's lost. As you know, there's no losing in sports, or whatever the honest quote was. You played for a year straight whenever I came.
All right, let me go to your Wall Street Journal column of earlier this week. America needs better bombs. I actually thought, Congressman Gallagher, that I knew where our shortfalls were, submarines and in cyber and things like that. I did not realize we had fallen behind in advanced energetic materials. So since you're Mr. Happy Face, here's another hole in our defenses. Tell people about this.
Well, this is a fixable hole, and I think it's why I've been so attracted to the issue of energetics for the last 4 years. So energetics are things we put in our weapon systems, things that go boom, propellants, explosives, and pyrotechnics. And largely, we are still reliant on energetic technology that was developed in the 40s and the 50s, where we made massive strides during World War II. It helped us overcome an adversary's advantage. But subsequently, we have not done another quantum leap when it comes to energetic materials. We had significant advancements in the 1980s when we developed a powerful material called CL-20. CL stands for China Lake, where it was developed at Naval Surface Weapons Center at China Lake. It far exceeded the power of the previous suite of energetic materials, RDX and HMX, by significant power. Unfortunately, as the Soviet Union dissolved, priorities moved away from enhancing the lethality of our systems and more towards minimizing risk. So we haven't harvested the potential of CL-20. Meanwhile, in a classic case of our relationship with China, China has stolen that technology and is using CL-20, which can increase the lethality or the penetration depth of weapons by about 40%. So the punchline of all of this, Hugh, and the reason I think it's a huge opportunity for whichever one of our friends becomes Secretary of Defense in a few months here, is that we're not talking about developing a new ship or a new technology. We have the technology right now that we can place in existing weapon systems and increase their power and penetration depth by upwards of 40%. And then you start to think about the dilemmas that poses for the Chinese if we surround them with a bunch of long-range precision fires with advanced energetic materials that can strike Chinese targets throughout the Indo-Pacific theater. You start to transcend the fundamental problem of the Indo-Pacific, which is the geography. The geography is vast. There's a lot of water. We have trouble getting inside the weapons engagement zone. The Chinese military has built a rocket force to keep us outside of the first island chain. Advanced energetic materials give us a huge opportunity within the next 12 months. We're not talking about a decade, 12 months, to massively increase the lethality, which is a shorthand way of saying our ability to kill the enemy. Lethality is not about diversity defined in gender terms or racial terms. Lethality is about improving our ability to kill the enemy. Here we have an opportunity to directly improve our lethality. All it requires is leadership from the president and the Secretary of Defense.
Congressman Gallagher, retired though you might be, you'll still remember, we have DARPA, and we are not allowed to use DARPA without putting dollars in the tip jar. But let's just tell people it's the research arm of the Pentagon. Is this something DARPA does, or is this something you go to Joe Lonsdale or one of the high-tech entrepreneurs and say, build this for us, or do you go to an existing defense? Who builds the new energetic material?
Well, DARPA could have a role to play in research and development for the next generation of energetics. But right now, I'm talking about using technology that was developed in the 1980s, back when I was a child, and putting it in existing weapon systems. So you don't even need a DARPA-like effort. You don't need a Manhattan-like project. You could get the Joe Lonsdales of the world and all the patriotic capital that's out there in order to fund a factory or a set of factories that leverage existing materials, putting them in existing weapon systems, and things start to get very exciting. And then you can start to use technology. For example, I work at a defense software company, Palantir, to create a digital twin of all of these weapon systems, a digital twin of all of our warheads, so we're not wasting time and money actually firing these things in real life. That's where you can almost have a DARPA on the cheap.
Congressman, we have 9 minutes to cover two things. The first thing is, what is patriotic capital? Because I love that term. I'm going to appropriate it unless you put it into print first.
It's all yours. I look forward to seeing it in a future Hugh Hewitt Washington Post column. I don't even demand a footnote, just maybe a kind word from time to time, Hugh. Yeah, it's my way of describing what I've seen in the last 5 years, which is there seem to be a lot of investors. You mentioned Joe Lonsdale. He's at the leading edge of this. I would also highlight folks like Raj Shah, the former DIU director, who has
our friend Peter
Capital.
Thiel, with whom you're working now, is a patriotic
Exactly.
capitalist.
Founders Fund is a perfect example of this. Trey on his team that are trying to get the venture capital community and other forms of capital and invest it into the defense industrial base or into technologies that are relevant for U.S. national security. And it used to be the case that was verboten, that LPs didn't like that, or that the employees of various companies and funds were skittish about doing work with the U.S. military. I think, the war in Ukraine and other geopolitical crises have changed that. And now you're seeing a lot of money that otherwise would have been invested purely in technology companies that are optimizing algorithms for cat videos or how to addict our children better, are now trying to invest in that next generation of companies that improve our defense industrial base and restore our military deterrent. The CTO of my company, Shyam Sankar, started this initiative called the First Breakfast Series. And the First Breakfast Series basically takes its name from something called the Last Supper. The Last Supper happened at the end of the Cold War, where the
Oh,
Secretary
yes.
of Defense. Say again. What's that, Hugh?
Harold Brown, right? Was it Harold
Exactly.
Brown?
Got all the defense prime companies in a room and said, hey, a bunch of you are not going to exist in a few years because we're cutting the Department of Defense. And thus the defense industrial base narrowed. It became ossified, sclerotic, and we basically have about 5 big defense companies, and it's very hard for new companies to break in. The first Breakfast series is part of that patriotic capital movement of creating a broader ecosystem of new companies and a healthier defense industrial base. And so I'm sensing a sea change. Now, where it reaches a roadblock is that the Pentagon still makes it very, very difficult and sometimes impossible for these new companies to survive, fundamentally because the Pentagon still does 2 things poorly. One, it doesn't leverage commercial off-the-shelf technology. There are still so many program officers and hobby project folks in the Pentagon that think they can build things themselves, particularly software, as opposed to just getting something that's already been developed in the private sector. And then second, the Pentagon doesn't do a good job of making big bets on a small subset of new projects. Instead, it sprinkles money around where it's eventually diluted and it's not enough for these new companies to survive. Perhaps that's related to a third thing, which is a general risk aversion within the Pentagon. And that's why I keep coming back to the leadership of the Secretary of Defense. Ultimately, if you read the memoirs of every Secretary of Defense, you can see the DoD historical series on my shelf back there, which is phenomenal. I recommend it to you. It all comes back to the Secretary of Defense willingness to assume risk and in some cases go to war with his own bureaucracy. So whether it's Robert O'Brien, Tom Cotton, Mike Pompeo, or another person in the universe, this is something they're going to have to tackle head on and harness all that patriotic capital that wants to invest in U.S. national security.
Our friend Jerry Hendrick is working on a book about the 1950s and the Department of Defense under Charlie Wilson, who brought an automobile manufacturer's mentality to the DoD, which was, what have you done for me lately? We need a new model every year. And so we turned out aircraft. Jerry's given me the outline of it. Aircraft model after aircraft model. It was like the fins have got to get bigger, the fins have got to get smaller. Do you see that? You're back in the private sector, I hope for a limited period of time. But do you see that in the private sector, this relentless drive to innovate and produce something new?
100%. It's interesting. I'm a month into working at Palantir, and just the energy, the intelligence. I mean, I'm surrounded. I used to be the young guy in Congress, right? I was the youngest member, youngest man in Congress when I got elected, and now I'm like the old fogey, surrounded by brilliant, 20-somethings, all of whom are there not just to make money, but to do something good for America. I mean, Palantir is all about defending the West and stands for the now quaint or out-of-date notion that America is a force for good in this world. And so that is, I see a ton of energy.
Haviv Rhetoric yesterday. If you have not listened to Haviv Rhetoric talk to me yesterday, said the most important thing in the world is for America to realize how powerful it is and to deploy that power. Now, one last question before I go back to talk to Ben Domenech. I want to visit Palantir sometime. Given what you just said about the demographics there, are you going to greet me with a wheelchair at the door?
Yeah, we have a whole section. We have a retirement home section for you, Hugh. But you should do a live podcast from there, and you can interview our CTO about the first breakfast series. We would welcome that. There's plenty of snacks, and we can blend up the food so you're able to eat it and it doesn't cause.
I am looking forward to that because I honestly believe patriotic capital and innovative spirit at the Pentagon can resurrect our defense industrial base in a lickety split. I don't think it has to take years. Last word to you, Mike Gallagher.
Well, I completely agree, and it's a huge opportunity for a new administration. And finally, when you interview Ben Domenech, you should ask him about his unhealthy obsession with bizarre, grimdark fantasy novels. You might want to bring that up with him if you want.
I will. I'll start with that after I play for him. David Fry's 2-out, 2-on game-winning home run last night. Only the second Postseason play, pinch hit home run in Guardians, Indians, Spiders history. So, Mike Gallagher, you go have a good week, even though baseball is no longer a part of your life. Football is no longer a part of mine. So I feel your pain. Thank you, Congressman.
See ya.
The 2-2 delivery. Swung on, hit a ton, deep left, green, back, track, wall, gone! David Fry! Off the bench, a 2-strike, 2-out, 2-run home run.
Morning, Glory, America. I just wanted to make your day end Ben Dominich's, because that's only the second time in more than 100 years of Cleveland baseball that a pinch hitter has hit a home run off the bench in the postseason. Last time was 1954. Ben Dominich, good morning. I hope you watched the game.
So yes, I should say I didn't watch the whole game, but I caught that moment and most of it. And look, here's all I'll say about that. I am very glad that in this moment you have something to talk about other than Cleveland Browns football.
That's true, because, man, I got nothing there. I got nothing. Now, I have a question for you from Congressman Mike Gallagher. I've got to get to one subject with you, so I got to get this done quickly. Ross Douthat and I always talk fantasy series. And, the fades get confused with the orcs, and sympathy gets confused with the ability to jump. They're like all these great fantasy series. They go for hundreds of books, and they eat up hours. Gallagher's afraid you're obsessed with dark and really mysterious fantasy worlds. What's he talking about?
Well, I think he's projecting a little bit, because we have bonded over the years over an affection for some really. It's I would say it's actually better than Game of Thrones. It's more of an action-packed kind of approach to the fantasy genre. And as kind of airline books go and that type of thing, it's a much more satisfying read than One More Thing churned out by a committee.
But Ben, I've read Wheel of Time. I've literally read them all, and they're all confused in my head now. Do you keep them straight? Because then they turn out a new one, and I don't know what series it's in.
No, it really requires you to have a devotion to it beyond what an adult should really do at this stage.
Oh, it got me through COVID. When I walked hours after hours, I just read these. There are 1,000 of these out there. All right, let me get to the serious stuff. It's not serious, but I need your help. My working theory is that Kamala Harris skipped 9th grade and cannot diagram a sentence. And I played Kamala clips for the first 2 segments of the show. To prove it, I want to play one from last night for you from the Univision Town Hall, so you can both diagram it and tell me what it means. Cut 16.
So my pledge to you is that by the grace of God, and hopefully with your support as well, when I am elected president, I will bring back that border security bill, and I will sign it into law, and do the work of focusing on what we must do to have an orderly and humane pathway to earn citizenship. And one of the biggest problems with failure to have a comprehensive plan for immigration is that we have not given them the pathway to earn their right to citizenship. And that is, again, that is one of the priorities for me, frankly, in terms of my motivation for what I know we must do. And I think it's...
Ben, I think that's one sentence.
I think
it's possible it's 2.
And my left eye is twitching slightly as I'm attempting to follow that convoluted outline. Look, she has had a run here of what ought to be easy wins. A cupcake schedule of conversations with media members who are naturally very friendly to her and to her interests. And what we've seen is that this cupcake schedule looks more like a gauntlet. And it's not because they're asking tough questions. They're asking obvious questions. This is, by the way, the thing that people are missing about this whole 60 Minutes interview and why it was such a debacle is that none of those questions were tough. They were not particularly gotcha questions. They were not questions that she shouldn't have been able to anticipate. Instead, they were pretty obvious and straightforward. The only issue was, of course, that Bill Whitaker kept asking them and pressing her on these things, and she didn't have an answer, and that was very well in evidence. So, I mean, it's a terrible situation, I think, for her that this was supposed to be something where she comes out looking like, a top 5 team in the coaches poll. And instead, she's, basically, she's lost to App State. She's dropped one to Louisiana Monroe, and suddenly it's all of these cupcakes have made her, really exposed for how weak of a candidate she is.
No, she's Toledo playing the opener with Ohio State. It's Akron this year. A MAC team always plays the opener. Ben, my first proposition is she skipped 9th grade. My second alternative theory is that they don't teach diagramming sentences in Montreal. Why can't she deliver a speech? Why are there not punctuation marks? Where is her team to teach her how to do this? I am trying to illustrate it's on the screen right now, what a sentence diagram looks like. Do you think she can diagram a sentence?
I mean, I think that to your point about the Montreal thing, perhaps they don't have it up there because they would consider it rude. And of course, the Canadians are very polite. And by the way, I don't know if you saw Pierre.
I played it. It was fabulous.
Fantastic. People in America, politicians in America, should look to him and learn from him in terms of the way he deals with questions like this. But to me, when you look at what is coming out of this media moment for her, it's a real lack of confidence. A lack of confidence that is detectable among Democrats, one that really shows her not to be the kind of generational political talent that they had pretended that she was throughout the summer and in the relief of her elevation. But now they're stuck with her, and they're basically seeing her do all the things that led her in 2019 to lose before a single vote was counted. And that is that she's both too online, too cautious, too far left for the center-leaning, independents, and too far, in a certain sense, authoritarian for some of these progressives. And that's something that I think, if she was smarter, she could lean into it. And one of the things that I think she could have done is make some distinctions when it came to Joe Biden that were basically about critiquing him the way that you would a grandfatherly figure. Saying something like, when she's asked the question, how are you different than Joe Biden? She could say something like, well, maybe he's been a little too loyal to some people who came up with him. Maybe he's been a little too loyal to
That's elegant. That's elegant. That would have been good. Now, I have a question, Ben, and we only have 3 minutes. If you were her senior advisor, and I think the bottom is falling out, I really do. After this horrible, terrible, no good week, the bottom is going to fall out on Team Harris. And you need to plug the holes in the boat. I would recommend she seek me out and Guy Benson. I think we are the 2 nicest people in broadcast that are conservative, that will give her a long form and will not interrupt her, because she has to do an obstacle course now that's a real obstacle course. Do you agree with that sort of advice, or do you have a better setting for her to go to? Because she can't go back to 60 Minutes, and she can't do Stephanie Rule again. She's got to actually do some moderately difficult but civil exchanges with people.
I think that that's something that would have been wise for her to do perhaps even weeks earlier. And, one of the things, obviously, we both are on Fox. I'm a contributor there, and I think it was a mistake for Democrats this cycle to keep Fox at arm's length and to take cues from her about doing so. Do you think that it would have helped John Tester to go on Fox? Don't you think it would have helped Sherrod Brown to go on Fox? Don't you think that some of these people who, are in critical races across the middle of the country should be on the #1 cable news network? And I think that the fact that they didn't do it, taking cues again from her and from this White House comms team, which has not covered itself in any kind of glory, I think that they're going to look back on that and say, hey, we just kind of ignored all these people, or we sent the message that they were deplorable, and they ended up holding us to account in a way that can't stand, in a way that has to.
Last question, Ben. She is accepted as CNN Town Hall. I do not think that does anything for her at all. Zero, even if she aces it. Do you?
Yeah, I don't think it's talking to a different audience. I don't think it's actually reaching into the kind of communities that she needs to. And the likelihood of her having another bumbling moment in which she goes through a diagram that requires you to basically write off the side of the page. It's the John Mulaney thing of, I made the letters too big at the beginning, and now they have to be super small.
That is exactly what she does. She goes off the page. Well, I'm right here and now saying if she calls me up, she's welcome here. I know Guy would welcome her. I know that Brett, I know that I know that anyone with a platform would welcome her and do so civilly. But I don't think she can do powder puff anymore. She's been bad at it. Do you feel the bottom's falling out, Ben?
If when you're taking, as Tim Walz did, questions from Michael Strahan and you can't handle them, yes, you've got a real problem. Bottom's falling out.
Amen to that. Ben Domenech, follow him at Ben Domenech on X at B Domenech. He is a Fox News contributor. He's editor-at-large at The Spectator, and he's our weekly roundup. But this week we just dialed in on Kamala clip and why she cannot communicate. We cannot listen to that for 4 years. It is cultural suicide. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. I know it's wrong to be jealous or envious, but sometimes I wish I were a liberal. I think you know the kind. They're always sure and certain, and they never change their mind. There'd be no introspection, no reflection, no remorse. I'd sail in one direction, and I never would change course. They have a way of blocking out the evidence before them. Faced with inconvenient truths, ironically, ignore them. Dealing with bad outcomes, well, they've found a way to bluff. The program isn't failing, we just haven't spent enough. I'd never be concerned about transgressions or abuses, with legions of apologists preparing my excuses. A lurid accusation, the media won't credit it. A fumbling, foolish answer, the media will edit it. I'd have a calm and mellow air of certitude about me. The world might be in chaos, but it would be worse without me. I'd say it's time to turn the page. When asked what that would bring, I'd smile and say contentedly, I wouldn't change a thing. That's Some Things Never Change by Tarzana Joe.
Very timely, Joe. Every cliche of the Harris campaign is in there, I think, except we're not going back. So maybe next week we can go back and amend and revise. Joe, how's business at TarzanaJoe.com?
Very good. Very wonderful. I've met
Are
some
they Christmas
wonderful
poems?
No,
Are
I'm
they
surprised
Christmas?
how many October and November weddings. I had one Christmas family poem when you made that comment, but people they're not ready for Christmas. They're not ready for Halloween. But so many October and November weddings. I'm very, very happy. Happy for the loving couples out there.
I'm happy for everyone who gets a Tarzana Joe poem. Head over to TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com. Send him your request. Send him your needs. He'll give you a very reasonable rate because he's inflation resistant. He is our inflation fighter in the poetry department. The price of poetry hadn't gone up 25% in 4 years. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com for all your poetry needs. And today's poem already posted at TarzanaJoe.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Now, I want to go back to something Ben Domenech just mentioned, that Tim Walz whiffed on a Michael Strahan question. So I went and found it during the break. Here it is.
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance.
Yeah. Well, it's not the campaign's position. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's folks that feel every vote must count in every state. Mm-hmm. And I think some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
I don't know what to say other than he's a doofus. And you know it, and I know it. She can't speak in grammatically coherent fashion. He can't think in any fashion. It is the worst ticket in my lifetime as an adult. I started with Ford, Carter. It is the worst presidential nominee, the worst vice presidential nominee, the worst communicator. Now I want to tell you about one thing, which is food for the poor. We need your help. Hurricane Milton hammered all across Florida. There are tens of thousands of people who need help. Food for the Poor is sponsoring. I have contributed to, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have contributed to the relief supplies that are going out by the truckload, not just now to North Carolina and Tennessee and Virginia and South Carolina and Georgia, but the headquarters of Food for the Poor is right there in Florida, and the warehouses are open, and they're going to empty them. And we could put more in and distribute it more quickly through partner churches if you will help join us in reaching Food for the Poor. Go to my website, hughhewitt.com, or call 855-359-4673 and donate. Derek Marin is running for Congress in my home state of Ohio. He wants to be the 9th Congressional District Congressman. Derek, welcome back. I'm a big supporter of yours for many reasons. One, Marcy Kaptur has been there since the beginning of time. I mean, I'm 68 years old. She's been in Congress. She's 70. She can't not be in Congress. We've got to change that over. But number two, you authored a law which ought to spread across the country. You only have to go to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles in Ohio every 8 years to renew your license as opposed to 4. You ought to win on acclamation on that alone.
I agree with you. I've had 20 legislative victories in the Ohio House. I'm really proud of that one. We're doing everything we can to reduce the lines of the BMV, and it was a good law change. So it's great to be with you, Hugh. Thanks
Derek, she doesn't want to debate you. Tell people about why not and how the Toledo Blade, a very left-wing newspaper, is offended by her refusal to talk.
Well, Marcy Kaptur's officially turned down a public debate. I think the voters deserve a discourse, a good discourse of ideas, and to hear where we stand on the issues. But Marcy Kaptur doesn't want to have to stand alongside me and have everyone hear how she's voted to allow men to play women's sports, how she's voted to increase taxes on working families, how she wants to get rid of everyone's gasoline-powered car and force them to buy an electric vehicle they likely cannot afford. She doesn't want to hear how she's voted to put illegal immigrants in front of American citizens. And her record's horrendous. And she's been one of the most least effective members of Congress. And she can't afford to get on the debate stage and have her record further exposed than it already is.
Now, Derek Marin, I'm not an ageist. I'm 68. I'm going to work at this at least until I'm 72. Maybe I'll go to I'm 76, maybe. But that'd be the end for sure. She's 78. Honestly, does it not occur to people that the world doesn't rely upon them, that they need to move on at some point? Do you hear that out there, that Marcy Kaptur has just been there since the beginning of time?
Well, Hugh, she's part of the political class. And, I believe in term limits for members of Congress. I mean, we got a lot of people that all they care about is their title, their pocketbooks, their prestige. And Marcy Power, just like with Joe Biden, is just clinging on to power. They can't give it up. They're obsessed with it. And, unfortunately for America, they're basically wrong on every single issue. And history has proven that. And it's a shame at this critical time in history that they are allowing illegal immigrants to just flood our country, drive up our crime. I was in Yuma, Arizona several weeks ago. It's a complete disgrace with what's happening on the border. And Hugh, it's time for my generation. It's time for my generation to step up and lead and save the greatest country in the history of the world from these socialists that people do not put our country first, that want to tax us to death. They want to regulate us out of existence. And we have to fight back. And that's what I'm doing here in Toledo, Ohio. And I need all your listeners here that are listening to join with me today and help push me over the finish line.
Now, I want all my national audience to understand. I have the list of the NRCC targets. Derek Marin is on it because we can win this. The RD divide is good. He can win this. He needs resources because, of course, she has dark money coming in, because it's their stake in the Ohio that can be flipped. It was supposed to be flipped in the last term, and the candidate kind of ran into a wall. Derek Marin, are you able to compete on the financial resources? And I know small dollar donors matter, so give us your campaign website.
My campaign website's derekmarin.com, Ohio's 9th Congressional District. Hugh, we are being able to compete right now. They're spending almost $1 million against me a week to defame and slander my name. However, we do have resources, but we're getting beat on the hard dollar right now. And as long as we can get our message out on TV, radio, and digital, and the direct mail, we're going to be okay. We don't need to match them dollar for dollar. But I've got to have a little more money here in the final days to expose everyone for Marcy Kaptur's failures for the last decades, and to show my vision for America, which is, what the founding fathers designed: limited government, a constitution big enough to fit into the Constitution, lower taxes, unleashing America's energy, and putting America's first, and having safer communities by stopping these illegal immigrants coming across our border and making a mockery of our rule of law and order here in the United States.
Derek, educate us. You obviously have Toledo. How far to the east in Ohio does the 9th District go? What other cities are in your voting district?
Yeah, we go to Erie County. It's Vermilion. Then we have Ottawa County, Sandusky County. And I go all the way to the west in Williams, Defiance, at City of Defiance, Bryan. We have Wauseon, Archibald, Perrysburg, Ohio, Sylvania, all of Lucas County. And it's a district that leans Republican. Republicans should win here. We're going to win here. And we just have one person, still hanging on and clinging to power that we need to ultimately bring back and,
retire. We need to retire Marcy. Derek, how long have you been in the Ohio House?
8 years.
So you are ready to go. And that is about the time that someone should spend in a state legislative seat before they go to Congress. How do you feel? What does your internal polls show you about the race?
Our polls show us it's in the margin of error right now. I think as of today, this is probably a tied race. We may be slightly ahead. Voter turnout is going to be very, very important. But the polls show us with momentum, Marcy Kaptur is well below 50%, even with 100% name ID. And Hugh, as you know, that's a really bad sign for any incumbent. We've got to keep our foot on the gas here and continue to expose Marcy Kaptur's failures and just get my vision out here. But Marcy Kaptur is one of the most vulnerable Democrats in Congress right now, and we've got to win this. The path to securing the Republican majority in the House and expanding it runs through Toledo, Ohio, and that's why you're having me on here today, and having all your listeners from around the country understand that what happens in Toledo, Ohio, may very well shape the future of America for generations to come.
So let's conclude, Derek, the campaign website again if people want to help you.
It's Derek, D-E-R-E-K. Last name's Merrin, MERRIN.com, Ohio's 9th Congressional District. I would be so appreciative of all your listeners' support to help push me over the finish line.
Derek, good to talk to you. Come back before the election. We'll check in again. I really want to retire Marcy Kaptur because she deserves to go to retirement at the age of 78. Just ease back. Marcy, you don't need to have a driver. You don't need to have the staff. You can let go. Thank you, Derek Merrin. I want to go back and remind all of you, while I raise money and ask you to contribute to candidates in competitive races, Mike Rogers yesterday, Derek today, Evans yesterday from Colorado, I only ask you to focus on competitive races. I also need you to focus on hurricanes Helene and Milton. They devastated our colleagues, our friends, our citizens, our fellow countrymen's homes and lives and livelihoods. And Food for the Poor has partner churches in North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia and in southwestern Virginia. But they are at home base in Florida. That's where Food for the Poor is. That's why we have the website up at hughhewitt.com. If you go there, you'll find the button. I use the button. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I decided, let's dig deep and help these people out because we have lots of friends and family in Florida. And by the grace of God, they were all spared. There are more than, I think, 15 dead and tens of thousands displaced and hundreds of thousands still without power, but they're getting it back up. But it's going to be a while to repair back-to-back hurricane damage. And Food for the Poor is there. They're already there. They have the warehouses open. The trucks are gassed up. The roads are being cleared. They are getting it out. It is not going to be a matter of weeks before the supplies arrive. They'll arrive today. And they'll keep arriving as long as we have money coming in to send the trucks. So please go to hughhewitt.com and hit that button for Food for the Poor. I've been working with Food for the Poor for decades. I trust them. That's who we contribute to in a disaster where they reach, whether it's in Central America, Haiti, the DR, one of those places. They have great networks there. But they're in Florida. So I want to help Florida. So I said, get food for the poor. You can text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555 to rush emergency relief supplies to that zone. And it's across the entire state, just south of the I-4 corridor. Or you can call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. The best and easiest thing to do is go to HughHewitt.com. The banner is at the top. You cannot miss it, even if you're a Steelers fan. Now, I just want to relax a little bit here. It is Friday. Sarah Bedford's coming up. Can we play again, David Fry? This is Tom Hamilton, courtesy of WKYC in Cleveland, calling the big call for David Fry last night. Helps to have the sound
deep
on.
left, green, back, track, wall, gone! David Fry! Off the bench, a two-strike.
All right, so I want to point out to you, back, track, wall, gone, David Fry, 2 out, 2 on, 2 out, 2 strikes, home run. Direct. Tom Hamilton is a superb broadcaster. Now I want you to contrast how he told you what was going on with cut number 16 from last night, Kamala Harris talking about a pathway to citizenship, sort of with a sentence from hell. Cut number 16.
So my pledge to you is that by the grace of God, and hopefully with your support as well, when I am elected president, I will bring back that border security bill and I will sign it into law and do the work of focusing on what we must do to have an orderly and humane pathway to earn citizenship. And one of the biggest problems with failure to have a comprehensive plan for immigration is that we have not given them the pathway to earn their right to citizenship. And that is, again, that is one of the priorities for me, frankly, in terms of my motivation for what I know we must do. And I think it's...
Let's count the ands. All right, let's start over and count the ands. Leave my mic up. Go ahead.
So my pledge to you is that by the grace of God, and hopefully with your support as well, when I am elected president, I will bring back that border security bill and I will sign it into law.
2.
And do the
3.
work of focusing on what we must do to have an orderly and humane pathway
4.
to earn citizenship. And one of the
5.
biggest problems with failure to have a comprehensive plan for immigration is that we have not given them the pathway to earn their right to citizenship. And that is, again, that is one of
7.
the priorities for me, frankly,
8.
in terms of my motivation for what I know we must do. And I think it's
9.
I think it should compel us to agree they should not have to live in fear, but should have an ability to be on a pathway to earn their citizenship. So it is one of my priorities.
I am dumbfounded by that sentence. The concept is bad, but 8, 9 ands? Oh, 4 years. Horrible prospects. Sarah Bedford joins me, Sarah C. Bedford on X. She is the political and investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner. Sarah, what do you do when everyone's out of town and we're in the campaign season? Are you focused on Kamala and Donald, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I think all eyes are kind of focused on the top of the ticket race right now, right? Especially because it's maybe even more than in previous cycles going to be so determinative of what happens down ballot. So yeah, all eyes, the whole newsroom really focused on the presidential right now.
So Sarah, I have been wrong before. I thought Mitt Romney was going to win in 2012. I thought Jimmy Carter would lose the nomination to Ted Kennedy in 1980. I know when I've been wrong. I've been right a lot, but sometimes it's easy. Like 2008, we knew Obama was going to beat McCain. This is one I have no idea, but I feel like the bottom may have fallen out of the Harris campaign this week. Has that sentiment been echoed by anyone you work with or talk to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hear Republicans, privately are starting to get almost giddy about what they're seeing in focus groups, in private polling, showing that it's potentially about to get a whole lot worse for Kamala Harris, that she may have peaked way too early, and the timing could not be better for Donald Trump to enjoy what seems like a real genuine vibe shift towards him. Every number in every swing state seems to be trending his way, and it seems like the strategy that Kamala Harris has taken to address that may even be backfiring when the more she gets out in front of the camera, the more she's reinforcing this perception that she doesn't have any real policy positions, that she doesn't know how to get specific or answer a question directly. I mean, these interviews that are meant to shore up those concerns may actually be deepening them among voters.
Oh, I think they're killing her. I want to play for you from Telemundo last night, from Univision last night, cut number 16 on a pathway to citizenship, which absolutely nobody should campaign on. Cut number 16.
So my pledge to you is that by the grace of God, and hopefully with your support as well, when I am elected president, I will bring back that border security bill and I will sign it into law and do the work of focusing on what we must do to have an orderly and humane pathway to earn citizenship. And one of the biggest problems with failure to have a comprehensive plan for immigration is that we have not given them the pathway to earn their right to citizenship. And that is, again, that is one of the priorities for me, frankly, in terms of my motivation for what I know we must do. And I think it's, I think it should compel us to agree they should not have to live in fear, but should have an ability to be on a pathway to earn their citizenship. So it is one of my priorities.
So we are going to be compelled to have a pathway to... Sarah, has anyone suggested this in any bill that you have followed in the last 2 years?
No. I mean, amnesty, this idea of amnesty is so deeply unpopular with the electorate right now. It's especially unpopular with Hispanic voters, which is why it's so mind-boggling that Kamala Harris is using this as a closing argument to voters when Donald Trump has a sort of by modern standards, historic lead among Latino voters. I saw a poll that shows that Donald Trump is only 14 points behind Harris nationally with Hispanic voters, where he was 36 points behind Biden just 4 years ago. And Donald Trump is talking tougher on immigration than most Republicans who have run for president in the past few decades. He's promising mass deportations, and that has closed the gap by more than 20 points with Hispanic voters. So there is not an audience for a mass amnesty right now, and it's puzzling why Kamala Harris is ending her campaign on that note.
I cannot decipher the diagram of the sentence because it went on for so long, but it landed on pathway to citizenship twice, and I thought that wasn't on my bingo card for the last 3 weeks. So I'm just curious, in the bill that she wants to bring back, I do not even think the Langford version of the bill had a pathway to citizenship in it, did it?
No, and the parts of the bill that she had been focused on previously, which were much more popular, were adding funding for 1,500 more Border Patrol officers, tightening some of those asylum requirements. So to shine the spotlight on amnesty provisions that aren't even part of what a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers were pushing is really strange. And keep in mind, now that we're 3 weeks or so away from the election, everything that the candidates are saying, this is their closing argument. It's not time to try a new message. This is their final pitches to voters. And she's still sort of field testing different approaches to these same issues.
I think we're going to see another I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message using that clip. Sarah C. Bedford on X. Thank you, Sarah. Always good to see you. I want to encourage all of you to go over and subscribe on my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt, because I learned from Ruthless yesterday, the podcast Ruthless, that when 100,000 of you have subscribed to my YouTube channel, I get a plaque, and I want to give it to Dwayne. We never give anything to Dwayne. You can also go to Highly Concentrated Hugh, my podcast, Dwayne's World Podcast, everything at the universe. And coming up, Dr. Larry Arnn. Remember, hurricane relief, the button is at HughHewitt.com. Help Food for the Poor. Help those people in desperate circumstances in Florida and the other states impacted by Helene and then Milton.